Good morning, Dougal, said Florence. Morning, said Dougal tersely. You're rather terse. I feel terse. In fact, I've never felt terser. Why, what's the matter? Said Florence. Well, I was woken up this morning by some terrible jangling thing. I feel jangled. I'm never at my best when I'm jangled. I think it was a fire engine or something. No, I don't think it was, Dougal, said Florence. That's it, screeched Dougal. Definitely it. An alarm clock, said Florence. Alarm clock, said Dougal. Sounds more like Big Ben gone mad. Really? Now, what's it doing now? Huh? The alarm clock was trying to speak. What's it saying? I'm not sure, said Florence. Well, tell it to go and alarm someone else, said Dougal. It's very pretty, said Florence. Thanks very much, said the clock. But what's the use of being pretty if you can't wake anyone up? True, said Florence. I'm a failure. You woke me, said Dougal. Oh, did I? Did I? Said the clock. Yes, you did, said Dougal. Oh, good, said the clock. You see, said Florence. Yes, good. Good? Good? What's good about it? Said Dougal. Now, Dougal, steady. Steady? I'm exhausted. And I shall go and get some sleep. Don't start that again. Do not start that again, or I shall lose my very considerable temper. All right? I thought I made myself clear. Now, Dougal. It's all right for you. You're human. But dogs need their sleep. Good night. Now, don't worry about him, said Florence. I'll find you someone else to wake up. Try a snail. Who? They said. A-S-N-A-I-L. Someone calling me. Someone calling me. Me. Someone calling me. Good morning, good morning. Everyone up bright and early? Oh, did I say something? You're always saying something, great oaf. You've hurt its feelings. Look, I just wanted to wake someone up, said the clock tearfully. Well, we'd like to help, said Florence. You speak for yourself, said Dougal. Oh, I know. That rabbit. You know someone who needs me, said the clock. I should say so, said Dougal. Of course, said Florence. That rabbit needs an alarm clock the size of a house. I should think you do very well. And Dougal went to have some refreshment for the excitement of it all. Dougal? Yes. Now, where's that rabbit? Florence called Zebedee. I'm glad you called, said Zebedee, because it's time for bed. Hoist with my own petard, sighed Florence. What? Said Dougal. And the clock tried to do what lots of people had tried to do before, and failed. Whither away so fast? Said Brian. Just practicing my speed trials, said the train. Beep, beep. I'm the fastest thing in the garden, she said. Beep. Care to have a race, said Brian, against little old speedy me? The train shook with laughter. My dear, she said. But Brian was not put off. A race, he said.
All right, said the train, I'll give you 3 miles start. That's telling him, girl, said Francis. When you're ready, said the train, giggling. Just limbering up, said Brian. So am I, said the train. Ready? Boop. Dougal was looking for Brian. I don't know. When you don't want them, snails are under your feet. But when you do want them, can't be found. I hear your friend Brian is giving the train a race, said Ermintrude happily. What? Said Dougal. Racing a train? He's gone off his head. At last. Florence arrived. And Zebedee. I hear there's a race going on, he said. Care to go and see it? Oh, very much, said Florence. It's between Brian and the train, said Zebedee. Most unusual. Florence was delighted. Spinning well, I see, said Zebedee. Shall we go? So they went. Dougal was organising things as usual, but Florence wanted to start the race. Ready, she said. And they were. So they went. Care to take a bet, said Dougal. I should like the snail to win, said Ermintrude, but then I'm a sentimental old thing. He's 4 miles behind already, said Dougal. Give him time. Time? He'll need it. Florence picked some flowers for the winner. But the train ran out of steam. And so finally did Brian. Florence wondered where they'd got to. Been arrested for speeding, I shouldn't wonder, said Dougal. Poor pathetic little clump. I shouldn't have let him do it. Ermintrude said the contestants seemed to have given up. But it was very, very exciting while it lasted. Yeah, about as exciting as the weather forecast, said Dougal. But Ermintrude insisted it had been exciting. Zebedee arrived. Race over? He asked. Looks like it, said Dougal. I'm thinking of entering them for the next Monte Carlo rally. Well, better get to bed then, said Zebedee. All right, said Florence. And she asked Dougal to give the flowers to Brian and the train. Good night, she said. I wish people wouldn't leave all the work to me, sighed Dougal. How do I pick this lot up? Really? Feel such a fool. Mr. Rusty was worried about his chimney. It needed sweeping. He told Zebedee. Sweep it then, said Zebedee. Yes, well, easier said than done in this day and age, said Mr. Rusty. You don't see a lot of chimney sweeps about for some reason, do you? Zebedee went to have a look. You're right, he said, and Mr. Rusty had to laugh. You look a proper caution, he said. A proper caution? And he laughed like a bucket. Don't fall off, said Zebedee coldly, trying to be dignified. Oh, I'm sorry, said Mr. Rusty. It's just that you looked a proper caution, said Zebedee, slowly. Exactly, said Mr. Rusty. And then they thought about the best way to get the chimney swept, without the sweeper being a proper caution. Florence met Dougal in the garden. What have you got there? She asked. It's my patent chimney sweeping device. Oh, I see, said Florence, going for a little walk. It's extremely clever and simple. said Dougal. Bit like me, really. What do you call it? Said Florence. The hedgehog, said Dougal. And what are you going to do with it? Sweep chimneys, said Dougal. Oh, yes, said Florence. What am I going to do with it, really? Muttered Dougal. You're muttering, Dougal, said Florence. They arrived. Now, where's that snail? I told him to be early. Never trust a mollusk. But Brian was on his way. Here I am, old fat friend, he said. Watch it, said Dougal, and come on. Florence wondered how it was all going to work. Won't work, said Brian. Of course it will, said Mr. McHenry. Florence started things off. Now, who's going up? She said. They all blenched, especially Dougal. Well, someone's got to go, said Florence, but no one seemed very keen. Shall I go? She said. Why not? Said Dougal. Oh, said Florence, and thought about it. Dogs climb ladders, said Mr. McHenry. Go on, Dougal, said Florence. No, said Dougal, so loudly they all jumped. Oh, well, said Florence. I think it's a job for a human being, said Brian. It's a two-legged job and I haven't even got one. It's a well-known fact. Snails are legless. Mr. McHenry finally volunteered and went up on the roof with Dougal's chimney sweeper. Careful. Could someone go inside and tell me if anything's happening? Said Mr. McHenry. Nothing startling as yet, said Brian, peering. Mr. McHenry worked away, to some effect. And then, unfortunately, he dropped the sweeper, with unfortunate results. Oh, was ever a snail so put upon? And Brian went home in a snaily huff. What? Florence giggled when she shouldn't have. What's going on? Said Zebedee. I thought you were sweeping chimneys. And he went to investigate. Good night, sighed Florence. Did I do it right? Said Mr. McHenry. Well, not quite, said Florence. Mr. Rusty was still worried about his chimneys. I'm worried about my chimneys, he said. They'll have to wait, said Florence. Don't forget to wash before bed, said Zebedee. Mr. Rusty had written a letter to the local council, protesting about road conditions in the garden, and Florence agreed the traffic was getting heavier. Zebedee asked what the trouble was. I'm campaigning for a green belt, said Mr. Rusty. I'm sure you'll look very pretty, said Zebedee. Shall we go? In the garden, others were campaigning about a variety of things. And everyone, including Dylan, was busy preparing signs prohibiting or advocating or demanding various things for various needs. Even the birds. And Penelope. And the train. Between her shunting activities, and Mr. McHenry. And of course, Brian. It was obvious some coordinating had to be done, so Zebedee asked them all to explain their signs. Me first, said Brian. But Zebedee said he would leave it to Florence to choose the order, and would they please put their signs on the posts and explain. They agreed. Everyone should be given a fair hearing, said Zebedee, and they agreed again. Democracy, said Zebedee. Lovely, said Ermintrude. Penelope was to be first, and she explained her sign meant danger, spiders at work. Dylan was next. Your turn, Dylan, said Florence. Lazy thing, said Penelope, tartly. Dylan's sign was no hooting, rabbits sleeping. Ermintrude was next. I wonder what it'll be, thought Florence. It was keep off the flowers. And then it was Dougal's turn. Oh dear, thought Florence. Keep cows off the flowers, said Dougal. Doesn't look a bit like me, said Ermintrude haughtily. Mr. McHenry's turn, said Florence quickly. And Mr. McHenry's sign meant, apparently, scooters only. Cheek, said the train. And when Florence asked for her sign, put up one which simply said, trains only. The twin birds were next. Crazy, said Dylan, for their sign meant music permitted. Florence had a look at the signs. Do you know, we might get a bit cluttered, she said. It'll be more cluttered when lightning gets here, said Dougal. Lightning was on his way. 1 mile per hour maximum speed, said Brian. Typical, said Dougal. Mr. Rusty was last. Flowers are best, he said. Oh, I agree, said Florence. Dogs are best, said Dougal's well-known fact. Well, dogs are all right, said Mr. Rusty. Except one, watch where my eyes rest, said Brian. Zebedee asked if the signposting had gone well. All right, said Mr. Rusty, but I maintain there should be just one sign in the garden. Which one? Said Zebedee. This one, said Mr. Rusty, and mine. Man, said Dylan, I'm out of breath, like exhausted, you know. Do you want to be a Scottish rabbit or not? Said Dougal. What's going on, Dougal? Said Florence. Oh, I'm teaching yon rabbit the rudiments of the pipes, said Dougal. But yon rabbit didn't want to be taught the rudiments of the pipes. I feel kind of foolish, ma'am. Where are ye, wee rabbit? It's very wearing, ma'am, said Dylan. And he sat down to have another practice. It's an ill wind, said Dougal. Etc., etc. Mr. McHenry wanted to know who was being tortured. It's Dylan, said Florence. And it's not torture, said Dougal. He's learning the noble art of bagpipes. Ah, bagpipes, said Mr. McHenry. I've got some of those somewhere. Well, there's hope for you yet, said Dougal. And when Dylan arrived, Mr. McHenry left to get his bagpipes. We'll have a pipe band, said Florence. Mr. McHenry came back with his bagpipes. What's that? Said Dougal. And Dylan. Well, I used the pipes to water the garden, said Mr. McHenry. Dougal left in disgust. Sacrilege, he said. Sacrilege. What's the hole for? Said Florence. That? Oh, that's for catching rain, said Mr. McHenry. That's a very useful instrument you have there, said Dylan. Florence called Zebedee. And when she asked him for a needle, he produced one. Any thread? Said Florence. No, I don't have any thread, said Zebedee. Now, what could I use instead? What are you looking at me for? Said Dougal. We need thread, they said. Not from me, said Dougal. Oh, one little piece, Dougal? About so long? They said. I can't spare it, said Dougal. Get off. Fiends. You won't miss one little hair, said Mr. McHenry. What? I am very attached to all of them, said Dougal. So get off. Get off, get off, get off! Fiends. Taking advantage of your shaggy friend. Fiends. Well, it won't hurt, said Zebedee. Really it won't. No, it won't, said Florence. Painless, ma'am. Painless? Tearing great lumps of hair out by the roots? You're a band of savages. I'll report you all to the RSPCA, or the head of BBC One, whoever that might be. What? There. Didn't hurt, did it? What? Thank you, Dougal. Something tells me I've been taken advantage of, said Dougal. And I hope your spring squeaks. Oh, don't be like that, said Zebedee. Florence finished sewing Mr. McHenry's bagpipes. Time for bed now, said Zebedee. Can someone play a lullaby? 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 That lot couldn't play any lorry if she had one hand tied behind her back. Lullaby! Dougal was worried about his eyes and was testing out a new pair of glasses. You know, I really think I can see better with these. Much better. Oops, takes a bit of getting used to. That's better. Now, long vision perfect. Now, what about close-ups? Let's see. Dougal's Japes by William Shakespeare. You know, I didn't know he'd written that. Now, visual identification test. Flowers, yes. Very good. Now, what's the time? 10 to 10, yes. You know, I couldn't see that clock just now. These glasses are marvellous. Now, a little drink. Now, what's that? Picture of me? I've never seen that before. Just think what I've been missing without glasses. It's a chastening thought. A chastening thought. Chastening. Florence arrived. Hello, Dougal, she said. What have you got glasses on for? Because I'm going deaf, said Dougal sarcastically. Oh, I see, said Florence. Really, said Dougal. May I have a sit in your chair, said Florence. Be my guest. Dougal, I really would like to know why you've got those glasses on, said Florence. Isn't it obvious, said Dougal. We are none of us getting any younger. Even the keen-eyed and ever-watchful dog begins to need an artificial aid or two. Oh, dear. But, Dougal, said Florence. No, please, don't interrupt, said Dougal. I don't wear them for pleasure, you know. But, Dougal, please don't try to be kind. I know what you're thinking. Poor old thing. He's past it. That's what you're thinking. I'm thinking no such thing, said Florence. If you'd just let me explain. Explain? Oh, I know what you will explain. You will explain that your friend is still your friend, even though he was growing old and grey and useless. Dougal, I think you're getting rather maudlin, said Florence. And all I wanted to say was... Stop! Think of all the famous people who had to wear glasses. Napoleon? Julius Caesar? I didn't know Julius Caesar wore glasses, said Florence. Ignorant thing, said Dougal. And then there was Genghis Khan and my Auntie Meggsy. One learns something new every day, said Florence. Yes, one does if one listens to little old historical me, said Dougal. But we are straying a little from the point, I think. Yes, we are, said Florence, because... Now, you're going to say I look ridiculous, said Dougal. I know, but I shall have to learn to live with it, like Shakespeare. What can I say, thought Florence. I'll be bumping into things soon, said Dougal, heavily. Dougal, you haven't got your glasses on, said Florence, very quickly. What do you mean, haven't got them on? What do you mean? What do you mean, haven't got my glasses on? What do you mean? They're sitting on top of your head, said Florence. But why didn't you tell me, said Dougal, instead of letting me wander around, making a fool of myself? I tried, said Florence. Pooh, said Zebedee. I like your hat, he said to Dougal, but it's time for bed. Good night, said Florence. Dougal was a bit put out by it all. Good night, Dougal. Yes, it's all right for some. They haven't gone around looking foolish all day. I've gone blind.
When Florence arrived, Mr. Rusty said he had a splendid idea. Oh, what is it? Said Florence. Hide and seek, said Mr. Rusty. Zebedee arrived. Hide and seek, he said. Yes, said Mr. Rusty, all of us. All of us, said Florence. I see, all of us, said Zebedee. So they all went. In the garden, everyone was excited about the game of hide and seek, especially Brian. But who was hiding and who was seeking? Well, I'm hiding, said Dougal. Well, I prefer to hide, said Mr. Rusty, and Florence, and Mr. McHenry, and Dylan. We know who that leaves, said Dougal. Zebedee arrived. Have you decided who's it? He asked. Yes, they said. Brian, said Dylan. Snails are great at seeking, man. They are well known for it. Now, just a minute, said Brian. Just a minute. All decided, said Dougal. Everyone hide. So everyone went to hide. Right, you lot, said Brian. Hide, because I shall be at you like a lynx. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Coming! Like a lynx. 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 Here I come, said Brian. Like a lynx, we know. None of the others had been found, not even Mr. Rusty or Mr. McHenry, who were both fairly visible. No one would be daft enough to hide in there, said Brian. Watch it. Dylan and Florence and Mr. Rusty and Zebedee hid on while Brian sought. Not very good at it, is he? Said Mr. Rusty, and was caught immediately. Dougal began to get the impression that he was being toyed with. And Mr. McHenry discovered that hiding behind his motorbike didn't work. Dougal found Zebedee just before Brian did, and Florence gave herself up. "Where's Lynx Eye?" said Dougal. But Zebedee decided it was time for everyone to go to bed. "Thank you, Brian," said Florence. "Good night." "Good night," said Mr. Rusty. "All exhausted, I suppose?" Florence asked Mr. Rusty if he'd seen Zebedee, and Mr. Rusty said he hadn't, not for some time. So Florence called and waited and wondered, because it wasn't like Zebedee to be late when he said he'd be early. "Stuck in the traffic?" said Mr. Rusty. "What traffic?" said Florence, which made Mr. Rusty think. But before he could decide, Zebedee arrived. "Sorry to be late," he said. "Get stuck in the traffic?" said Mr. Rusty. And then he realized he'd missed hearing something, but he couldn't think what. "Did you notice anything?" said Zebedee. "Like not hearing something you usually hear, for instance?" "Oh, yes," said Florence. "No boing." "Exactly," said Zebedee. "I'm using my spare spring, and it doesn't boing." "Then we must do something about it," said Florence. "Have you seen a spring, Dougal?" she asked. "Have I seen a what?" said Dougal. "A spring," said Florence. "Surely you mean the spring," said Dougal. "Or the summer, or the autumn." "Oh, no, you misunderstand me," said Florence. "I mean Zebedee's spring. He's lost it, and I'm looking for it." "Lost it? I thought he was attached to it," said Dougal. "Look, why are you going the other way?" he said peevishly. But Florence didn't listen. She was too busy looking for Zebedee's spring. "Good morning, Ermintrude." "Good morning, dear heart." "Have you seen a spring?" "Spring? Oh, what a lovely time. The flowers that bloom in the spring, tra-la." "Goodbye, Ermintrude," said Florence. "She's never been the same since she did all that moon jumping," said Dougal. "Oh, was that her?" said Florence. Dylan was asleep. "Don't bother," said Dougal. "He wouldn't know a spring from a hole in the ground." "I would too," said Dylan, to their utter amazement. "A spring makes a noise and a hole in the ground keeps silent. It's a natural law, ma'am." "Well, having sorted out that little problem, perhaps we can get on," said Dougal tartly. "Furthermore, a spring," said Dylan, "goes like this," said Florence. "Yes, we know. Thank you." "When you've quite finished pirouetting," said Dougal. "Oh, Dougal," said Florence. "Come on, Pavlova." "Oh, Dougal," said Florence. "Crazy," said Dylan. "Like, crazy." "Now, who else can we ask?" said Florence. "I can think of someone," said Dougal darkly. "Boing, boing, 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 boing." "I might have known," said Dougal. "I might have known." "I like it, I like it." "Now that's naughty, Brian," said Florence. "I am setting," said Brian, "a new trend in snail behaviour." Boing, boing. Florence was infected. But Dougal was disgusted. "I refuse to notice what's going on," he said. "Spoil sport," said Florence. "Spoil sport?" said Dougal. "You wait till I get you home." "I like it, I like it." Oh well. Zebedee arrived and learnt the awful truth. "I'm afraid your spring's a bit bent," said Florence, giggling. "This is no laughing matter," said Zebedee. "Luckily I'm able to put it right, and I suggest it's time for bed." Mr. Rusty was having trouble with his roundabout, and a high wind. which had made repairs necessary, but at the same time very difficult to carry out. Florence wondered what the matter was. "It's this wind," shouted Mr. Rusty. "Nearly blown the roof off the roundabout. I'm trying to mend it." "Oh, do be careful," said Florence. Zebedee arrived. "High wind," he said. "Yes," said Florence. "I'd have difficulty keeping my feet if I had any," said Zebedee. "Better go and look into it." "Yes, all right," said Florence. Dougal was having trouble too. "Hello, Dougal," said Florence. "I washed my hair last night," said Dougal, "and now look at it. Just look at it. Ruined. Ruined." "Wind's playing havoc with my tulips," said Mr. McHenry. "Oh, bad luck," said Florence. "Tulips? What about my barnet?" Mr. McHenry tested the direction of the wind. "West," said Florence. "Right," said Mr. McHenry. "Then go and stop it," said Dougal. "Right," said Mr. McHenry. "Can you?" said Florence. "Well, I can try," said Mr. McHenry. "I'd be eternally grateful," said Dougal, "because if this goes on much longer, I'll have to put on an extra vest. Not to mention what it's doing to my well-known and lovely locks. I feel so humiliated. Humiliated." Mr. McHenry told them not to worry. He'd found the trouble. It was a weather vane, new to the job, and a little uncertain of its duties. "Try and get it right," said Mr. McHenry. "Yes, try and get it right," said Dougal. "I'm sure it's doing its best," said Florence. "Well, that's as maybe," said Dougal. "But what about my hair?" The weather vane tried and tried to control the wind. "It's no good," it said. "I'm a failure." "No, don't say that," said Florence. "Yes, you can say that," said Dougal. "As a weather vane, you are a hopeless failure. You should take more lessons." "Well, I'm very new at it, you see," said the weather vane. "And as I look a bit like a chimney, the winds won't take any notice of me. It's all very, very trying. But I am doing my best." Florence felt very sorry for it. "You see, I might order a nice south wind to blow," said the weather vane. "But it'll just laugh at me and go off to Africa or somewhere." "Well, it's not in Africa now," said Dougal. The weather vane lost control completely. "What can we do?" said Florence. "I'll get better at it," said the weather vane. "I'm sure I will." "Well, you could hardly be worse," said Dougal. Florence decided the weather vane should have a prize for effort at least. "Thank you," said the weather vane. "I know I'll improve." "We're sure you will," said Florence. "We're absolutely sure." "Speak for yourself, smarty boots," said Dougal. "Have a word with Bert Ford. He's got problems too." "Who's Bert Ford?" said Florence. "Oh, don't you know anything?" said Dougal. "I'll keep trying," said the weather vane. "You try me," said Dougal.
Mr. Rusty was playing his barrel organ. "You haven't played that for a long time," said Zebedee. And when Florence arrived, she asked to hear it again. So Mr. Rusty obliged. "Bit tiring," he said. "Going to the garden?" said Zebedee. "Oh, yes, I think so," said Florence. Dougal was waiting. "Hello," said Florence. But Dougal was strangely silent. What's wrong, Dougal? Yes, well, I wish I knew. Oh dear, thought Florence. And then she saw something. No birds, please. All birds out, please. Garden full. Thank you. See what I mean? No dogs, please. All dogs out, please. No dogs on the grass, please. No humans allowed. Thank you. Busy little Apeth, isn't she? Said Dougal, but I think she's got her values mixed up. No birds, no dogs, no humans, no cows, no snails. Thank you. Thank you. Florence didn't quite know what to make of it all. This garden is for the exclusive use of scarecrows. Thank you. If I don't keep a tight hold on myself, someone may get thumped, said Dougal. No thumping, no barking, no speaking. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, and thank you too, said Dougal, for nothing. No thanks, no tipping, thank you. Florence was in a quandary. What shall we do, she said. Well, I could think of something, said Dougal. Florence called Zebedee. Trouble, he said. It's her, whispered Florence. Oh, I know how to handle that, said Zebedee. So he handled it. I admit to being baffled, said Dougal. No baffling, thank you. Everything allowed, everyone in, thank you. Funny what a few new clothes will do, said Dougal. Yes, isn't it, said Florence. Thank you. Funny the things that go on, thought Florence happily. Thank you, thank you. I think I'll go and chase a few snails, said Dougal, make myself feel better. And he went.
Florence was meeting Dougal, and when he arrived, he said he had something to show her. Follow, he said. Follow. My, we are being tardy, aren't we? I'm being as quick as I can, said Florence. But you're not even moving, said Dougal. Really? Hardly Miss Lightning today, are we? But where are we going, Dougal? That, said Dougal, is a surprise. Follow. Lo, said Dougal. Oh, said Florence. It's lovely, she said. Getting tired, said Dougal. Given your all? Now, don't be unkind, Dougal. Unkind? How can you be unkind to a music box, pray? Everything has feelings, said Florence. I should jolly well say so, said the music box, and especially an artiste like me. An artiste, said Dougal scathingly. It's not easy being a soloist, said the box. No, I'm sure it's not, said Florence. You have discernment, madam, said the box. Thank you, said Florence. Huh, said Dougal. I haven't finished my repertoire, said the box with some heat. It hasn't finished its repertoire, said Florence. I can't wait, said Dougal. Now, come along, Dougal, said Florence. I'm coming, said Dougal heavily. What I put up with in the cause of art. Mutter, mutter, mutter. You're muttering, Dougal, said Florence. I'm not muttering, said Dougal. I never mutter. You are the world's worst mutterer, said Florence. Dylan came along, found the music box, sat on it, and went to sleep. Dylan, said Florence. Ma'am, said Dylan, I know what you are going to say. Then I won't say it, said Florence. I am sitting on this music box as a protest, said Dylan. Funny sort of protest, falling asleep, said Dougal. Florence was puzzled about Dylan's protest, and so was Dougal, so he had some sugar to give him strength. I'm protesting, said Dylan, against canned music. Listen, instant music, the curse of modern civilization. And he wound up the music box very tightly. Play box, he said. Oh, temperaments, said Dougal. Music schmusic, said Dylan. Schmusic. I'm surprised you listen, man. Music. Huh. Zebedee arrived. Time for bed, I think, he said. Already, said Florence. Sleep well, Segovia, said the music box. Nice, said Florence. Thank you, said Mr. Rusty. Exhausting, though, he said. I may have to fit a motor. It wouldn't sound the same, said Florence, doing a little dance. Do you like my little dance? She said, doing it again. I think it's very moving, said Mr. Rusty. It brings tears to me eyes. Zebedee arrived. What you doing? He said. Little dance, said Florence and Mr. Rusty. Sorry I missed it, said Zebedee. In the garden, Florence called to Dougal, who wasn't there. Brian was. I am shattered and destroyed, he said. Why? Why? I'll tell you why. My shaggy chum has deserted me for another. Another snail? Said Florence. No, no, worse than that. What? I thought I was his only Shelley friend. I was wrong. Brian, said Florence, you must take a grip on yourself and tell me all. Yes, yes, I'll tell you all, said Brian. It's an oyster. A common oyster with a knobby shell. An old shaggy Briggs thinks it's lovely and talks to it all day. Great clump. I've never known anything like it in all my puff. Really, I haven't. Really. Brian was speaking nothing but the truth. Dougal had an oyster. You see, said Brian. Look out, Angus, said Dougal. Ah, company, said the oyster. Common mollusk, said Brian. He can talk, said Dougal. Yes, and so can I, said the oyster. Florence was quite overcome by the complications of it all. I've lost my pearl, said the oyster. He's lost his pearl, said Dougal. Nobody leaves the garden. Find the pearl. Everybody look. Everybody. Florence called Zebedee, who came. Trouble, he said. I've lost my pearl. Oh dear, said Zebedee. That will never do. Is this it? Looks like a pearl. My pearl, said the oyster. Come home. But the pearl hadn't, and seemingly didn't want to. Ungrateful thing, said Dougal. Hello, Pearl, said Brian. Got it? No, stop that. Stop it. No. Oh. Now, Pearl, said Florence, you're in the wrong shell. He'll sell you, said Dougal, if you don't come out. What shall we do, said Florence. Don't worry, Angus, said Dougal. Florence called again, and Zebedee came back. Yes? Florence explained the pearl was lost again. Well, said Zebedee, you'd better find it, hadn't you? Yes, said Florence. Why don't you go back to Colchester, said Brian. Whitstable, said the oyster. I'll see you later, said Dougal. Fair weather, friend, said Brian. Good night, Angus. Brian was waiting for Dougal, who seemed to be in a hurry. Oh, I got up so late this morning, I don't know whether I'm coming or going. You're going, old speedy mate, said Brian. I've got a million things to do, and I've not had time to put a comb through my hair yet. Yes, looks like it, said Brian. Bit shaggier than usual, if that's possible. What? Choose your words, snail. It's true. You could do with having your barnet trimmed. What a vulgar expression. Yeah, well, I'm a vulgar snail. You can say that again. Well, get your hair cut, said Brian. I will, said Dougal, if I can find someone sufficiently sensitive. Someone who realizes that I don't just want a quick top and tail. In short, an artiste. Florence met Mr. Rusty, and they passed the time of day. Lovely day, said Florence. Beautiful, said Mr. Rusty. Like you. Oh, thank you, said Florence. Zebedee arrived. Late as usual, said Florence. You'll make me cry, said Zebedee. No, I won't, said Florence. She looked for Dougal and couldn't see him anywhere. Oh, I wonder where he is, she mused. She saw something. Never seen that before. I wonder what it is. There was a noise. Florence stopped and was amazed to see Dylan apparently working. Why, Dylan! Ma'am, welcome. Welcome to my hairdressing boutique, welcome. Are you, comfortable, sir? Sir was Dougal. Don't disturb the curlers, sir, until I use the setting lotion, said Dylan. Curlers? Said Florence aghast. Setting lotion? Sir, you really must keep still, or all my efforts will be ruined. 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 Pardon me. Florence had never seen Dylan like this. He seemed quite agitated and distraught. Perhaps you'd care to look, sir? He said. Sir looked. Can't see anything, he said. One needs to remove the towel, said Dylan. If you'll just wait a moment, I'll take it off. Yes, just a finishing touch. Don't you dare, said Dougal. Florence pretended not to know who it was and said hello very politely. Hello, said Dougal. And Florence waited for something to happen. And something happened all right. Where are you going? You haven't finished yet, you rabbit, you. Florence found herself losing control. How do I look? Said Dougal. Chic? Elegant? That's what I was promised. Have a look, said Florence. So Dougal looked. What's that sheep doing there? Oh, it's me. It's me. I'll sue him. I'll bury his guitar. Ow. You wait till I find him. I'll make him rue the day he set foot in this garden. Savage. Call himself a hairdresser. He couldn't dress a football. Come back! Come back!